Hey, welcome to episode 126 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast. We are recording August the 8th, 2021. My name is Eric, the host of the show, based in Southern Ontario, hunter, target shooter, ham radio operator, and there was something in there about me being something else, but I cut it out. Thanks, Ian. Based in Southern Ontario, I'm a hunter, target shooter, and I read that already. I started a small preparedness company to help people get prepared and be able to look after themselves for at least 72 hours, if not longer.
You know, I threw in a little bit there and it completely destroys your
intro. completely screwed me up there.
Okay.
Thanks, Ian. I appreciate that. It's great.
Yes, that's what I do. My name is Ian, and I live on Vancouver Island. I'm a student preparedness, target shooter, and my farm's designated mediocre handyman.
I'm Alan. I'm a safety trainer, first responder, security expert, and overall safety nerd.
I'm Scott, first responder, splitting my time between Southern and Northern Ontario. I like to learn things, and I don't accept that things will always carry on the way they are simply because it'd be convenient.
And I'm Jeff. I'm based in Central Ontario. I'm a target shooter, soon-to-be ham radio operator, and general overall handyman.
I am Ben. I'm Ben. I recently resettled to a ranch in Arizona for better gun rights and more freedom. I'm the author of the Wood Gasifier Builder's Bible, a step-by-step guide to making your own fuel from wood so you can power through the rise and fall of the world order, because dark winter is coming, so be ready.
Want to help to support the show? Keep the Canadian Prepper Podcast on the air? Buy some swag. We have both the Canadian Prepper Podcast t-shirt and the tactical Velcro patch at prepperpodcast.ca. All proceeds help keep the lights on and the backup generator fueled with gasoline or wood gas.
And if you're enjoying the show, please take a few minutes and like us on Facebook and submit a review on iTunes. Also, we want your feedback, good or bad, or just if there's a topic you want us to cover. You can email us at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca.
All right, so we've got some powerful content for you in this episode. We're going to start off with some preparedness-related news articles. Next, we'll let you know what we've done for our preparedness, and then we'll get into the main topic, the wood gasifier technology. So let's move into the news.
In things that surprise no one, Quebec is implementing a vaccine passport that allows fully vaccinated people to have more freedom than others. Our dear leader supports this concept and wants to roll it out over the rest of the country. So be prepared to show your papers or not do things that you could otherwise do, because some people are more equal than others.
Yeah, 2 weeks from 2 weeks to flatten the curve to papers, please, in a year and a half.
It took a little longer than I thought it would, to be honest.
Yeah.
Related article for me, mandatory vaccinations. I guess he's asking if it's legal for federal workers to be subjected to mandatory vaccination. So I put an article link in there as well. But funnily enough, going with my age-old theory that whatever's in the headlines is the exact opposite of what happens 3 weeks later, I put in a couple other headlines for reference that 3 weeks ago, he actually literally said there won't be mandatory vaccines in Canada.
And now here's Quebec.
My head hurts.
What?
Yeah.
What? A politician lying about something.
Politicians.
Hold on.
I know
the first time that has ever happened in life.
I know politicians are shitty people, but I hold out some hope that at least they could be honest for at least a month.
3 minutes and 40 seconds, Eric, before you have to click the explicit button.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, that's all right. I get it. It's fine. I'll check the box. Free reign on swearing now.
Okay, so away from politics. Maybe not. I don't know. So 6 ships in the space of a day and a half kind of lost control in the Gulf of Oman within a very short time frame. So I think there was some, I can say it now, fuckery from Iran. And so they honestly, I don't know what's going on, but I guess a bunch of oil tankers have all of a sudden just lost control and started veering towards shore and veering towards restricted waters and everything else. And they can't figure out what caused it, but all of them were preceded by a drone flying overhead the ship. Funny hacker
when the
times.
helmsman wasn't able to do things, he was yelling out, "Oh man," as that was happening.
Maybe that's why they called the Gulf that, right?
That was bad.
There's one giant dad joke. Yeah. So yeah, interesting. I don't know what's going on with that, but there's obviously some technology being tried, or potential wartime strategies being tested, or whatever. But interesting.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
All right, I've got an article here that I'm sure is going to set a few people off on the panel. Vaccinated Americans can now enter Canada. Well, not now, as of Monday, so tomorrow can enter Canada, but vice versa, we still can't go.
Yeah. So before the show, I asked the guys if it was okay for us to do the same and go down to the States because Costco and well, as soon as I said no, I think my head had a minor stroke. I don't know what it was, but it's I don't understand how they can justify people traveling one direction but not the other. Right? Does COVID not recognize citizenship or something? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, no.
Who knows?
If we don't travel among them, we're not going to get sick. But if they travel among us, we're also not going to get sick for some reason.
Because science.
Or just
And there are people that come up here won't get sick and take it back down there.
It's got to work like a check valve, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. That's all yet. Yeah.
And I've just got one from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric, whatever it is, they call it NOAA in the States. And they're basically, just from the prepper side of it, expecting a active hurricane season for the fall of 2021. They're saying it's not going to be the worst, but there's a 60% chance that it's going to be above to more than above average. So just kind of keep your eye on your stock and things you've got if you're in an area where there's a possibility that you could be in the path of a hurricane.
Let's also be aware that weather forecasters are wrong, something like 85% of the time, and still manage to not get fired.
Yeah, true.
It's just true.
Which means, which could go one way or the other. It could be the absolute worst season ever seen, or it could be a little damp for a few.
Or they could go work at the CDC.
Yeah. Well,
or it could be like the Farmer's Almanac that has told us, and I didn't put it in there, but they're saying for this upcoming winter, it's going to be another cold and snowy winter, which is what they've been saying for 3 years, and we've had next to nothing. So
hold on, it's going to be cold and snowy in the wintertime?
Yeah, I know. It was shocking,
Come
isn't it?
on. Does that mean I'm going to have to start my snowblower 3 times instead of twice?
Yeah, apparently.
I think it's interesting because, like a baseball player, if you do your job well a third of the time, you're considered good.
That is actually you considered above average.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Fair enough. My news article kind of springboards off Jeff's, just looking at some problems they've detected with the Gulf Stream, and sort of the whole conveyor system circulating warm water around the Atlantic. And if that starts breaking down, it's going to further create weather problems. So yay, more things to prepare for.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is that first there was weather, and then there was a predictable pattern of weather, and then the pattern's changing, so there'll be more weather.
Huh.
Gotcha.
Regardless of the cause, weather events are going to happen. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So you should probably prepare for them.
Yeah.
And
You probably already have because you're listening to this podcast.
there you go.
Just saying. Shall we move into what we've done lately for preps?
I think that's a great idea, considering we're all listening to this podcast. I had some firewood delivered, some nice hard maple, and got some advice from a very wise fella about how to take down all those trees that fell and broke in that rather nasty windstorm I had a couple of weeks back. They're all kind of hanging awkwardly and not something I want to venture into haphazardly with a chainsaw. So that will be one of my coming projects.
Nice. Cool.
And I did some more food prep. I pulled out and just did my monthly test on my generator. We're having, now I'm not sure having what Eric's about to say, but we're going into a fish camp next month, and one of us is taking our generator to run it. So I just thought I'd pull it out and test it. I didn't realize that Eric had bought one of those good deals. I repaired the propane lines on the trailer. My mom noticed that she was going through an abnormal amount of propane, couldn't find any leaks, couldn't smell anything. I tried to convince her to, just take a lighter and go along the line and see where it lit up, but she wasn't willing to do that. So I don't know why, but I'm speccing out a metal, they call them a job box, as opposed to like a toolbox. It's just, Greenlee and a couple other companies make them. And I'm looking at that as a Faraday box that I can put my generator in. That will probably save me a substantial amount of money as trying to build my own with some fabric. So stay tuned for that.
That's a big heavy duty box. I like it.
Yeah. That'll be good. So for myself, I picked up a Furman generator on a pretty good deal, thanks to the better Andrew on the OG CPP, and Jeff for the fish camp. 2 is 1, 1 is none. So there we go.
That is true.
That's so true.
Yeah. Clean up my coax cables in the office here. So just for my ham radio setup, I had a couple of cables coming in just through the drop ceiling here, and it didn't look all that great. So ran those to the wall and made a couple of face plates to the wall and a little pass through. So it's all working. It looks a little bit more professional now. So no more wires coming down from the ceiling, at least not coax cable.
Awesome.
Did
As
you
for
just put some
myself,
random switches in while you were doing that?
Well, why
Just
not?
make people guess.
One
Yeah,
switch
exactly.
that doesn't do anything.
Mm-hmm. And then 2
But just
switches
says
that
master
do other
override
things.
on it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Emergency cutout, something.
it's kind of like the console in the Enterprise where Chekhov starts like flipping buttons and just furiously doing stuff just to make himself look busy.
If we're going down the Star Trek road, I'm just leaving.
All right, fine. Star Wars then next time. All right, as for myself, work. So yeah, boo for me. Unfortunately, things are picking back up, so I'm on the road a little more, so not a whole lot of time at home. Started receiving some bits for solar power box number 2. I'm trying to do a portable solar power box versus the fixed one in the house, so I can take camping with me with a portable panel and everything else. And let's see here, did a quick feed run to top up the chicken feed, and that's pretty much it. I only had time to do the waterers and feeder top up, and then kiss the wife on the forehead, high five the daughter, and go back to work. So that was it. And besides, we're supposed to keep this short now according to our listener feedback, so there we go.
True. Yep. Good point.
Well done, Ian.
Yep.
That's
cut back, Ian.
The most concise week you've ever had. I like it.
Yeah.
It's been a couple of weeks since I've been on. I was on vacation last week. Some much needed R&R, some mental health refresher. The only thing else that exists in my house right now is working on my garage, getting it ready to move into, because boy, I'll be excited when that happens. And just general house maintenance, kind of getting making general improvements around the house. So that's been my week.
Nice. I'm actually building a steel bunker in the desert, and I'm doing it while steel prices are shooting up 26%. But I think the time is more valuable than the steel, so I'm just going for it.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
Your
Ben
bunker
wins.
is way cooler than my garage.
Yeah. Ben totally wins this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
I was the most concise tonight.
Yeah, steel bunker totally.
I was
wins.
going to ask you about in-floor heating, but you're in Arizona, so you probably don't need that.
Yeah, I'm trying to get cool. Trying to live like the rabbits and the ground squirrels. I've been watching them and learning from them.
I'm pretty sure we're going to have you back on for another episode just talking about building steel bunkers.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm taking pictures. I'll definitely do that.
I'm very excited for your next book.
Yeah.
Well, that's one heck of a segue. We should move into the main topic.
So this topic has been a bit of a pet project of mine. It was actually how I found this podcast, looking for information on wood gasifiers. You guys didn't have anything, but I enjoyed the witty banter, so I kept listening.
Like you and 2 other people. So
Yeah.
Well, I brought some friends. What can I say?
There you go.
So I think Ben invented this technology and then traveled back in time to the mid 1800s to seed it. Is that right?
I did. Yeah.
So congratulations on the time travel.
Yep.
It's rather old technology. It was around in the mid 1800s, and apparently during World War II, there were roughly 1 million vehicles that ran on wood gas. Got a bit of a boost during the oil crisis in the 70s, to the point where FEMA in the States published plans to build a very simple one. The pros, like Ben, will warn you not to use those designs if you happen to like your engine, because there are much better designs out there.
Can I interject real quick?
Absolutely.
My first gasifier was a FEMA gasifier, and it took me 5 tries to even make any gas. But when it did, like when it finally made that first puff of gas, I felt like Merlin. I mean, it was, I went and grabbed like my wife and kids and I said, come look at this. And they're like, it's a puff of gas. Like, what are we supposed to think? And I was like, no, this is the beginning of something great. And then I cut it up and I built a good gasifier.
How long did that engine last with the FEMA gasifier?
I didn't even really, I think, get to engine grade after that. It was so intermittent, and I was making a ton of mistakes. I was shooting hot gas into water, and it was mixing steam with the flammable gas, and it was a mess. But I switched over to a Mother Earth News design, and then I was running a Lincoln welder generator. It was a 16 horsepower, single cylinder, really easy to clean the tar off the valves. You're just learning. You're probably going to make a little tar, and that's okay. But you little bit of acetone and a Scotch Brite pad will clean that up, and you can get right back in business.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Just to take it back to the beginning for the listeners, and the way I describe it, please feel free to correct me, Ben.
Yep.
When I'm describing wood gas, I tell people to picture a campfire. Right, we've all sort of sat watching the campfire, and there's that little bit that shoots out of the end of a log, and there's like a little jet of fire shooting out. Right, and that's basically wood gas. Right, if you put a metal funnel on your fire, you'll notice the little flame at the tip. If you stretch that tip further and further and further away from the fire, far enough to get that tube into an engine, you're taking some of those combustible products and putting them in the engine. Right, the burn in the campfire isn't just a one-step process; it's a whole multi-step process, but it's all happening kind of at the same time under your marshmallows.
Yep.
If we divide up that process, so the flammable gases are rising up, but they're not burning until they get enough oxygen, hence the dancing flames. That's kind of what we're trying to encourage with a big metal machine. So if we build that funnel to split up the stages of that process and move some of the gas from the campfire to burn inside the engine, we can power an engine.
Yep.
Bit of an oversimplification, but that's essentially explains the concept, I hope.
Yeah, that's a good concept. I also like to use a blacksmith forge just to kind of get the idea. The root of gasification is charcoal. Even though we can focus on wood, the chemical synthesis happens to charcoal. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But again, it's getting that airflow over the surface. You want it starved of oxygen, like Scott just said. And then, you can start pulling off the gas and running engines.
So wood gas has less energy density than other fuels. If we picture the tri-fuel generator that we were all talking about a couple of weeks ago that Costco had, put gasoline in it, you get 10,000 watts. Put propane in it, you get 9,000 watts. Natural gas, you get 7,000 watts. So it's the same engine, but you get different output based on the fuel.
Yeah.
So with wood gas, it'll vary depending on what you're putting in, like a nice hard maple versus balsa wood.
Yeah.
But as an estimate, let's say you get 6,000 watts.
Yep.
Is that a safe number to kind of look at?
Yeah, probably 5,000 to 6,000 watts. If you wanted to add a little kind of blower push to the air inlet, you probably get up to about 6,500 watts. Kind of a little electric supercharger kind of deal.
So, you're trading that energy density and convenience for fuel availability.
Yeah.
I have way more trees on my property than I have fossil fuel wells. So to me, it just makes sense to be able to use that as my fuel source. So it's really cool that smart people like Ben have refined a device to produce clean combustible gas with a high temperature, low oxygen burn. Admittedly, most of what I know, I learned about from Ben's book, The Wood Gasifier Builder's Bible. Admittedly, mine's only the second edition. Sorry, Ben.
It's all good.
And then all the matching videos on your very informative website, woodgasifierplans.com, and sort of all the linked videos on YouTube. And there's some fantastic stuff out there. We were talking about a little before. So it's lovely, interesting technology that I'm absolutely mesmerized by. I'm very excited to have you on as a guest, Ben, because I don't need to be on the podcast anymore now that we've done this show. So I'm pleased to introduce our guest, Ben Peterson.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys having me on. Been at this for about 15 years. And when I first started, I was so different. I was like helping, real estate developers, like Donald Trump sell $250 million worth of real estate in Vegas. I was a totally different person on a different life track, And then I started trading options, and I learned about, basically what was happening with subprime. And then I just kept going down the rabbit hole. And then I started reading globalist docs. And I started to see like, Agenda 21, all this other stuff and going, holy cow, this is real, even though it sounds insane. And so I took my little family and I moved us to the middle of nowhere on a 20-acre farm out in the Pacific Northwest. And I tried all sorts of stuff. I tried, the thermal electric modules on the wood stove. I tried, solar panels were still about $5-6 a watt at that time. Looked into steam, but most of the people who sold steam stuff, they were like, you're going to blow yourself up. I was like, well, I don't want that. And then I stumbled on wood gasification. I couldn't believe that it existed. I'd never heard of it before. I thought it was an internet hoax at first. And so I was really like the ultimate skeptic moving into it. And but I saw the need. I'd moved my family off grid. We're getting ready for what's happening now. Like everything that's happening now is what got this started, back then. And so kind of my own journey, started, I was just tinkering in 2007 and posting up, YouTube videos. And then in 2008, just a terrible storm swept through the Northwest. It froze over the freeway. Power was down for a couple of weeks. And all I had was this kind of Mother Earth News era, kind of gasifier and my Lincoln welder generator. And you know what? I was able to defrost pipes and power things and keep my life moving forward. And it was an aha moment. It wasn't pretty. I did make tar and I wasn't running 24/7 or anything, but it kept me alive and it kept me welding and working. And I felt like I was master of myself still. I wasn't a victim of, the weather or anything else. And so after that, I just decided I want to teach everybody because, wood gas is hard without a teacher because you're building a refinery. It's, it's a personal scale refinery and you got to get the chemistry right. So that's kind of what got me in and made me a believer.
Well, it's kind of funny because I was watching probably about almost 10 years ago now. It's Engineer 775. He has a YouTube channel and he does all sorts of things, water catchment. He does wood gasifiers. He does all this stuff. But everybody else just touches on it. They never actually go into any detail. And so, it's always one of those prepper things where you're like, oh, wood gasifier, good idea. But I have no idea where to even get started. So actually, I'm glad Scott got on this. And it's too bad we're going to lose him after this episode. But anyway, but honestly, because there's so many basic questions, a guy can ask that really there's no other source for it. So I'm certainly glad you're doing your channel. I'm trying to put it into perspective for the average listener, though, that obviously knows about what I do. And I read your document there and it said basically you can plan for 2.5 pounds of wood per kilowatt hour. So kilowatt hour meaning 1,000 watts for an hour, as far as power generations. So I kind of worked it out to 111 9-watt LED bulbs from Costco or 1660 watt bulbs for an hour is what you can do with 2.5 pounds of wood, which is basically a kilo for us in Canada, right?
You're a little over a kilo, for
yeah.
Sure.
And so and of course, I guess depending on the type of wood you're using, hardwood or pine or whatever, but that's actually still pretty energy dense when you think about it.
Yeah, it really is. If you fill a 5-gallon bucket full of wood chunks, what is it? It's in the book. I think it's about 22 pounds of wood equals the energy density in a gallon of gasoline, to give you an idea if you wanted to make that kind of comparison. So that's maybe 2 5-gallon buckets full of hardwood, maybe, depending how you kind of cut your chunks or whatever.
Yeah. So as far as size, if you're going to try and power a vehicle, which might be a little bit, I guess, audacious as a startup thing. But if you're trying to power a pickup truck or something, how much space in the back of that bed would it take up?
Well, it depends on the length of the bed, but you're probably going to take up a good half of it.
Okay.
I've done a Ford F-250 back in the day, but I was using stainless steel gasifiers and I wasn't comfortable parking it outside because I just felt like scrappers were going to come and take it out of the back, and it's just too shiny. You know what I mean? If you're gonna do it, you got to do it like Wayne Keith and those guys. They just use 55-gallon drums. I'm not a fan of that thin metal, but keep it kind of basic looking. And I did a dump truck one time, and I actually put it on the front, and that saved all the space. I didn't want to put it in the dump because that would have been really challenging to carry gravel around the property. But and then the plumbing was really easy because it was on the front, so I just went right back to a makeshift carburetor. It was ugly, but I got it around the road and got a YouTube video out of it and whatnot. So, to go 100 miles, you're probably going to eat up 30 to 40 pounds of wood. It'll depend on the size of the engine and the weight of the vehicle. You want to keep it light. The guys who really do this, they like a what are they using? Like a Dodge Dakota with a V8, like Wayne Keith and Drive on Wood. That's what he uses. Or there's people who do it on a trailer, like Vesa Mikkonen over in Finland, I think, whereas he's at. He builds really nice gasifiers for vehicle applications, and he'll put it on a trailer so you can kind of take it on and off. That has more to do with the inspections that they have for vehicles, and so he can just disconnect the trailer, go through emissions or whatever, get his stamp, and then turn around and go hook up the trailer, and he's back in business.
Okay, and so like just basically the engines, are they pretty much almost straight compatible with a wood gasifier, or is there like major adjustments you have to do to the engine to accept like a wood gasifier gas?
Back in the day, we used to really focus on like advancing the timing just a little bit, because there's hydrogen and carbon monoxide in the gas. So the hydrogen burns really fast and the carbon monoxide burns slow. Combined, they have an effective octane of about like 104. So it's it really likes a high compression. I mean, if you could put it in a spark ignited diesel engine, that would be the ultimate. Then you get all the power, or not all of it, but a lot of the power out of it. Is it definitely, it's a flammable gas, so you want to use a spark ignited engine. If you want to run it in a diesel, it's more challenging because you have to kind of blend up to 80% wood gas and still have some of that diesel to get that auto ignition.
Okay.
So definitely something to think about.
And so running a vehicle on wood gas, I guess differences in maintenance, I guess, be my big question. You mentioned tar removal. What's that all about?
Well, ideally, when you have your system tuned in, you're not going to make tars, at least once you're up to operating temperature. And so you have a flare mode. Basically, kind of how it works is, the first 5 minutes you're making wood smoke. And then it starts to get flammable. And as soon as it is, you want to light it just so you don't have to smell the smoke. And then right about 10 to 12 minutes in, the system's hot, you're ready to go, and you should be making a tar-free gas. And at that point, then you send it to the engine and you start running, and everything should be good. Tar is something, it can be design related for sure, but a lot of it's, just kind of new user stuff. And then just kind of sizing everything. You want the right size gasifier for the right size engine. And what I did in my book is I put a hearth sizing chart. And so you know exactly the dimensions in the hearth where the chemical processes happen to pair the hearth with the right engine, whether it's stationary or vehicle or whatever your application is.
Okay, could you like equate kind of tar with like creosote in a chimney for a wood stove?
That's exactly what it is. So It's just incompletely combusted, creosotes and oils. You're either not getting hot enough, or there's not enough what's called residence time. It takes a little bit of time for that stuff to break down, depending on the temperature. Right about 1100 degrees Celsius, it tends to break down pretty quick. There are designs that are more slow gasification, where they might only go up to like 950, but they have a way of making the chemical process go slower. So it's fine, it works. And there are people who have more of like a fast gasification approach. It's more of like a blacksmith forge. You're just hitting it with as much air as possible, getting it just fast and loose and doing it that way.
Whereas I guess with the gasifier, you want to kind of limit the airflow, I guess, to kind of keep it from turning from charcoal to open flame or something. Yeah.
That's part of the hearth sizing, because you want just enough oxygen coming in to get that partial oxidation. And the effect of that is essentially just heating up the surface of the charcoal. And then what happens is the oils rise up into the hopper. They kind of circulate, and then the vacuum of the engine or the blower pulls those kind of crude, smoky yellow oils down through this hot charcoal. In phase one, it goes through oxidation. And so it's hitting the outside of the charcoal, and it's breaking down. And when it breaks down and it burns, it really kind of turns into carbon dioxide. And then you have water vapor. And then just below the choke plate, which is kind of like a venturi in a carburetor, the charcoal is still hot, but now there's no oxygen. And so this chemical process happens called reduction. And the carbon has so much heat built up, it wants to burn so bad, it just starts ripping oxygen molecules off of anything it can get its hands on. So that charcoal in that environment, it'll pull the oxygen molecule out of water vapor, leaving the hydrogen for gas, and it'll pull an oxygen molecule off of CO2. And what that does is it gives you carbon monoxide, which I know has terrible branding, but it's a clean burning fuel. And then from that point, you should have a tar-free gas, and then what you'll have is light soot. just really fine kind of micronic carbon dust. And we use various types of filtration to filter that out. If you knock it down most of the way, it's fine. If you get a little bit in your engine and your intake, it'll burn fine. You just don't want to, clog your intake with it, but it's really not a big deal. Kind of the old timer guys, they don't mind a little bit of soot because most vehicles have, an aluminum intake.
Yep.
And that will actually coat the surface in the aluminum intake and just give it a little bit of extra protection.
Yeah, I was gonna say because there's got to be some sort of extra wear items or filters and stuff needed. So yeah, obviously a filter for the soot. But if you're running a vehicle on wood gas, is there any other kind of maintenance issues that might pop up that way?
Not really. Usually on a vehicle, those guys will run 2 filters. You have your main filter, and then you have what's called a plug stop filter. And that's like a fine polishing filter that's closer to your engine. And it's also there as a protection. If your main filter fails for some reason, the soot will rush through. It'll clog up that final filter. Your engine dies, and it says to you, "Hey, something's wrong," and then you got to fix it.
Cool. The only other thing I had been able to compare this to was the old Fischer Tropsch process back from World War II when the Germans were trying to make synthetic gas. Yep. Just for listeners, I know you answered it to me, but for the listeners, is that fairly similar to that process?
Fischer Tropsch is just taking wood gas or synthesis gas, compressing it over a hot, usually an iron catalyst, and that'll switch the molecules around, and it goes from a very fine gas that's even finer than natural gas. And those carbon chains will start attaching to each other and create what's called long chains. And when those long chains fall in a diesel range, they condense out into a clean diesel. And that's the Fischer Tropsch process. It was used by South Africa during the time of apartheid because they were under fuel embargo. Probably works best with like coal or charcoal, because you can do that at scale.
Yeah.
Or at least the coal you can. That's kind of that's the gist of it. I've done experiments with it, but it's the technical complexity. You have to pay for a compressor. You have to have the energy for the compressor. You have to get hydrogen reduced catalyst, and so you can either buy that or you can use the hydrogen from your system to reduce it down. It's a lot of complexity. I try not to dive into it because it's like eating a small crab. It's a lot of effort for just a very little bit of meat.
Yeah, no, I know the Germans were using coal because that's all they had at the time. But
yeah, they did really well with it for sure.
Yeah, awesome. I guess the other thing I was going to ask now, so just when you do fill up a wood hopper with the chunked up wood for the fueling process, and you're trying to reduce the amount of oxygen coming in there to control the outflow. Is it possible to refuel on the go, like the old trains where they don't pump thing and throw a couple shovelfuls in and stuff, or is it just like a kind of one and done? You have to start over from scratch.
Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
If you want a clean process that feels more civilized, it's better just to run a batch, let it cool down, and then fill it up later. If you open up the top while it's running, what's going to happen is the suction is going to pull in fresh air and it's going to mix with all of that unrefined gas up in the hopper, and it's going to go poof. And maybe a couple chunks of couple chunks of wood might even fly out. And you can do that. There's a little bit of smoke coming out, and you just you dump your wood in real quick and put the lid down. I did at one point make basically kind of like a valve, where you could do that. But it took up so much space. It made the gasifier, like half a meter taller. And so I don't know, it worked, but it's too much complexity. I'd like to keep things simple. I find a lot of people, they want to put all sorts of electronics on the gasifier to make it better. And I understand that, but I really build for, simplicity and ruggedness if at all possible
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm just going to break because I know I just realized I stole a question from Alan there. I'll let him go next, and then I'll probably come back to you.
Okay.
Yeah, you did steal my question, Ian.
Sorry, man.
So this is totally foreign. Frankly, anytime Scott starts talking about gasifiers, I kind of tune out in anticipation of this video, of this episode. So, how do you switch between your fuel sources? So you've got an engine, it's running. It's normally running gasoline, and you want to switch to this wood gasifier. How do you switch between sources?
You have to go in, and what I like to do is I take off the carburetor, I'll take the studs that go into the engine block and I'll weld up something longer, and I'll screw those studs back in. And I'm trying to create, I don't know, maybe like 4 to 5 centimeters of gap. And then I'll put a T into the side in between the carburetor and the engine block. And so I'll bring my wood gas in before the carburetor, because I don't want any of that light soot going through the carburetor and plugging up any of the venturis. It'd be easier just to, run it through the carburetor, but over time you're going to lose your gas functionality because those venturis will get, clogged up. So in order to run dual fuel, I would put some sort of cap over the gasoline carburetor, and then I would open up like a valve to my wood gas, and the air inlet should be as close to the intake as possible so you get good mixing and a quick startup time. One time I was experimenting and I moved the air intake a foot back. And so when I was starting the engine, it's just sitting there kind of choking on pure fuel, and it couldn't ignite until, that foot of travel was pre-mixed with oxygen, and then it would run. So kind of lesson learned, keep the air intake as close to the actual engine intake as possible.
Okay.
And I actually have there's a section in the book on how to convert an engine. And if you really want to go all the way, you can even automate it with electronics using like an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi. Kind of sucks to have to go to that level of complexity. But if you're running AC power, it really wants a crisp 3,600 RPM or 1,800 RPM to make that clean AC power. Now, if you want a more fudge factor, if you get like an engine and hook it up to a 48 volt or 24 volt, DC system, the engine speed can float up and down, and you can kind of, just set it and roll with it for a little bit.
Okay. And the other question I had, I haven't done any research into this at all in anticipation of asking you all these questions. So you mentioned that you would size the hearth and the system to the supply and the demand. Yep. Can you give me like an approximate how big would gasifier be that would run a dump truck? You said it was on the you had it on the front of the truck. So how big is this thing?
That one was I think I used propane tanks for the inside. I put the air jacket on the outside. And so propane tank is about 15 inches crosswise. So I think the overall outside diameter was about 19 inches. Let me look up, I can tell you the hearth dimensions real quick if you give me a second.
I just picture a wood gasifier being a really large appliance that would take up a fair bit of space. But it doesn't seem like that's necessarily true, or?
Yeah, I mean, I try to get the footprint down to 2.5 feet by about 5 feet for something that size for, the dump truck one. And then try to use your cooling lines either underneath or, you kind of hide them. So for a 5-liter engine, I have these kind of hearth sizing charts. So your the height from your air jets to your choke plate, and this is a picture of your choke plate. Again, it's like the venturi in a carburetor. Mm-hmm. If you've ever had to tune a carburetor. So the choke to jet height is 5 inches. Your choke hole diameter is going to be a little over 5 inches. I would use 10 jets on that, and the spacing from tip to tip on the jets is going to be about 12 inches. And
so it's not a small. This isn't a small apparatus.
No, it's not totally small. You can go to like micro gasifiers if you're going to use charcoal and just small engines, and you can really shrink it down considerably from there. I have used the cooling tubes as almost like a pallet underneath. So what's holding up the gasifier and what I put wheels on and whatnot, I'll actually make that cooling tube sometimes just to make it nice and compact.
Okay, that's great.
Just out of curiosity there, noise level. I mean, other than the obvious engine and the generators themselves, but like when you're first flaring off the gas to trying to get up to temperature and everything else, the first 5 to 7 minutes there, what kind of noise level are we talking about? Is it like a steam engine where it's kind of hissing off, or is it fairly quiet? Or
it's pretty quiet. You're just going to hear the hum of a blower, like a shop vac. Well, not even really as loud as a shop vac, but kind of in that range.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, like people always talk about solar being super quiet and everything else, but it makes noise. I mean, if you have a big inverters and everything else, but I mean, yeah, it's not exactly super loud, that's for sure.
Yeah. So let me just kind of try to walk people through the process as best I can from the beginning. All of the chemistry that happens with charcoal, and so what you'll find with wood gasifiers is they really work best with wood chunks, because wood chunks break down into chunky charcoal that you want it about the size of your thumb and a bit larger. And so you could go and pick up branches from your property. This is the part I love. You just run it over a bandsaw, and now you have some chunky wood. You put it in the gasifier, but you have to put charcoal in the hearth section first. And that way, when you're firing it up, you're shooting air into the charcoal, just like a blacksmith's forge. And if you've ever seen a blacksmith's forge, it gets a nice red glow. And then the heat rising up breaks down the wood into the gases. And like I said before, the heat below the reduction breaks down those gases into a nice, clean, kind of polished gas. And to make this happen, what they developed during World War II and even before is something called a downdraft gasifier. That means the air is flowing down and the gas is flowing down and the feedstock is flowing down. That produces the most tar-free gas possible. But the challenge is you have to prop that charcoal up so the gas can flow through. So what I do is I put it up on a grate, and that holds up the charcoal. And then the grate allows the gas to flow through, and I make the grate shake just a little bit back and forth, and it sifts the fine gray ash and lets it fall down into the ash cleanout port. And then the gas flows nicely up through, the heat exchange collectors. It goes through a cooling process. We're trying to condense out any residual water vapor. And then as you get the gas, the colder you can make the gas, the more powerful the gas is. And then from there, you'll flare off for the first 5 minutes, you'll get flammable gas, but really that high quality gas comes about 10 to 12 minutes in. So if you're looking at it in my videos and the gas isn't totally clear, you're probably looking in that 5 to 7 minute range. And then, hooking up your electric generator, I like to have a blower kind of past the generator. So that blower is pulling the gas through the whole system, through the filter, through the cooling tubes, up through the intake, and to the blower. And what that does is it makes the startup quick and easy. So there's already gas just right there at the intake. When you start cranking over that engine, it's pulling it in, and you can get a good startup. In the early days, I started with like pull start generators, and they don't get quite enough cycles for the engine suction to pull that gas through all those lines. And so while you're pull starting, your gasifier is cooling down. And if you don't get it to start up, and you might have to go back to flare mode and get it hot again.
Awesome. Like clearly I did not pay enough attention in chemistry class either. Just like I think Spain mentioned that.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't take chemistry. I'm a fabricator by trade. I went like around the world and built really high-end, architectural metalwork like Vegas and cruise ships in Paris and stuff like that, or France on the coast. And so my method was like the Edison method. I built a new gasifier every week for a long time, and I would test them because I didn't fully trust it. I didn't trust the information I was getting from the internet. And then I got to see, and then kind of one of the breakthroughs was I would get some fireplace glass, and I would set it on top of the main reactor. And as the wood got down, I could start to see the pattern, the jet pattern in the charcoal. And that started telling me a lot about the reactions happening inside. Like if you've ever looked into your fireplace while you're having a fire, it's a cool experience. And so I do the same thing with a gasifier. I started looking through the top, but it's not super practical. So then I switched up to a sight glass, and that sight glass is positioned on the outside of the machine right in front of an air jet. So you can look through the sight glass and look right through the jet and see the color happening inside the hearth. So you want it as close to kind of like white hot as possible. You don't want it to get too dull. And it tells you a lot about the velocity and the things that are happening inside. Or if there's no charcoal at all, you won't see any flame. And that tells you, okay, the machine's either empty or, we have to figure out what's wrong. One of the main challenges with wood gasifiers and the pitfalls that grab people is trying trying to get the wood to fall down. It's releasing all these sticky oils. Sometimes the wood can stick together in what's called bridging. And when that happens, kind of the charcoal gets burnt up below the wood, and there's an empty pocket, and then eventually the wood will fall down. But now your jets are blasting into raw wood, and now you're starting to screw the process up. Now you're gonna make chars, and so you definitely want to get your wood size right. And I like to connect the engine or the generator to your gen set with just like a metal bar or something, and let the vibration of the engine vibrate the gasifier. And so it's shaking and letting that wood kind of continuously fall down. And that really solves the problem. If you can mount the engine and the gasifier on the same skid and maybe put springs or something underneath, so the whole system just kind of, shake just a little bit, then you have a nice, consistent, feed and a good gasifier operation.
Awesome. Scott, you had some questions too?
Ben, you've talked about, doing these one a week for the last 15 years. How many gasifiers?
Well, for the last 15 years, just when I was getting started. So I probably built, I don't know, like 20 practice gasifiers, over the years. And then once I really started to get it down, we went into production for a while. I had Victory Gas Works. We had a big social network back in the day, and this is more kind of like 2008 to 2010 era. And so I started building then, and I switched up to stainless steel. I like it better. It performs better because it's more thermally resistant. It doesn't move heat as much as the mild steel. It costs more money. And so then once we were in production, I probably built like 100 gasifiers just using stainless steel and whatnot. And then Victory Gas Works, we have, members, and those guys probably built a couple hundred gasifiers, just kind of tweaking on my designs, just kind of riffing and doing their own stuff. And it's cool to see. And people are kind of doing the same thing with the book. I'll see, videos pop up on YouTube, and I have to kind of look at them and go, are they even doing this right? Because sometimes I cringe, some people will throw in like fine wood chips, and I'm like, no, don't do that. But everybody learns their own way, so I tend to learn through the school of hard knocks, and some other people learn that way too.
But you've also kind of talked about how you can tweak it to do different feedstock. If the area you're in doesn't have great big hardwood that you can bandsaw into 2-inch cubes, you can change your hearth, change your grate size, and make the gasifier work with the fuel you have.
Exactly. That's what I'm faced with here in Arizona. I don't have good access to wood, except the pallets that I pick up in town, when I run errands. So I have some wood, it's free and it's available. I like pallet wood. It's nice and dry. The one nice thing about Arizona, though, is the wood is so dry. Up in the Pacific Northwest, it's so wet. Trying to keep your wood dry, especially in the wintertime, it's such a pain in the ass. Well, I used to build lots of, kind of heated, wood chunk holders. I'd put an air jacket around something that had heat, and I'd use a blower to push that hot air up through the wood chunks to keep them nice and toasty dry. To work best, you really want it under 20%. There are ways to go with wetter wood. During World War II, this guy kind of accidentally developed something called a monerator hopper. He was putting a wood gasifier on the front of a car, and he had to shrink down the height so he could see and drive down the road. So he made this hopper that was kind of short, but it was super wide. And unbeknownst to him, he was creating convection currents inside. So the heat would rise up, the moisture would go out to the outer surfaces and be cold, and it would condense out that water. And so it was just kind of nice dry wood that was flowing down. And he didn't realize for a long time why it was working. He just knew that it worked. So that's I try to put some sort of extra skin, like a monerator, on my hoppers, but it's really about getting that thermal differential to get it one area of the skin, cold enough to condense water. Definitely works better in the wintertime than the summer.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So as an aspiring prepper, I want to end up with a wood gasifier powerful enough to run a generator.
Yes.
That can run a welder, so that in bad times I can make the next gasifier and I'll be king of the world.
Yes.
What advice do you have for aspiring preppers to get into their first wood gasifier?
I would whatever you do, get the best blower motor you can. What I did initially is I went out to the junkyard and I wanted to run 12 volts. So I get a 12 volt fan motor out of a junk car, costs $20. I'm patting myself on the back. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to build a cheap gasifier. Well, those blowers are good for moving a volume of air, but they don't have the deep suction. You want the deep suction like a shop vac offers. You get into something called water column, how much suction to move water up, say, an inch a column. And you want at least 9 inches of water column. So that's a fairly good amount of suction. The place, I tried getting blower motors everywhere, in the States, from China. China has the best deal, but man, it's so hard now with, the container rates going up and whatnot. So kind of my advice to somebody is to just find an old Craigslist shop vac or something like that, or a leaf blower, just something to give you like some good strong suction to start. And then I would look for used propane tanks, or if you have the money, a new propane tank is a way better, safer investment. But you want to get the tall tanks. They're in the States, they're called 100-pound tanks. They used to cost about 120. Now they cost about 180. But it's 1/8 inch steel and it's rolled in a cylinder, so it saves you so much fab time. So if you get the good housing to start, and then you get a good suction source to get it going, so you're getting that hot tar-free gas. The next thing is it's so mundane, but it's so important. It's the grate. There's different styles of grates. The grate is that thing that's holding up the charcoal. The gas is flowing down through the grate slots, and you got to find some way to shake it just a little bit to get the ash to fall through. But you don't want to shake the heck out of your charcoal, because that just releases more soot into your gas stream that you got to filter out. So you can do what's called a hanging grate. You can hang your grate on chains. And if you're a vehicle gasifier, the driving will kind of bump it and move it around. But for stationary, I probably designed like 20 different grates to get to the one I have now. And it uses a little, what's called a maker motor. You can pick these up for like $70. And a maker motor, just a little 12 volt motor, moves about 50 or 60 rotations per minute. And I'll use that for my grate, and I have it kind of on an oscillating. As the motor moves around, it reciprocally kind of has a reciprocal motion in the grate, and it just shakes it. So I would get that. That's the thing that's going to give you steady gas flow. If you just have a gasifier with just like a solid grate that's not moving, you'll get gas for about 15 minutes, and then the ash will plug it up. So I did that a number of times. I made that mistake lots and lots of times. But if you can just get a little bit of motion, it works good. I like to make it more intermittent. So you can get a relay from a company called customrelays.com, and you can just tell them what you want. I want a on-delay relay. I want something that's going to come on for 3 seconds or 4 seconds every 3 or 4 minutes. And that's all you need. You just need to come on for 3 seconds, just do a little shake. And then, a couple minutes later, it'll do it again. So that's really the maximum amount of automation you need. But if you have those three things, if you have a good grate, if you have a good vacuum source, and you have a good housing, something that you can weld up and make airtight, that's definitely the first place to start. When I watch YouTube videos of other people's stuff, it's awesome that they're out building. But I look and I see kind of all the mistakes that I used to make. You know what I mean? And I have to bite my tongue not to critique them. But I don't want to come off like a dickhead, so I just kind of mind my own business and don't say anything.
Well, yeah, we call them 20-pounders, 100-pounders up here as well. So I mean, get used ones for sure off Craigslist or whatever, quite cheap. Bain brings up some sage advice as well. He says, remember to cut the propane tanks underwater with scuba gear. That way you don't blow out the shop windows. So, yeah, I guess used tanks are, you got that, probably got to purge them out with get rid of the propane before you start cutting into them. But
yeah, ideally, if you get them in a scrapyard, somebody's forced to cut them in half before they can put them into a scrapyard. So if you can find those scrap tanks, then somebody's already cut it for you, and that's going to be a lot safer. I have, drained down full tanks and pulled out the valve and filled it with water, and it's just kind of a stinky mess. It's just way better if you can to buy a propane tank, or if you're building something small just for experiment. You might be able to get like an old oxyacetylene tank or CO2 tank, something like that. Just a good solid housing. And again, the seal is really important. So I'll go to a company like McMaster Carr and I'll get silicone cord, either 3/4 of an inch or 1 inch. And I'll use that for my seals. I seal the lid with that. I'll seal the, the filter with that. Anything high temperature, then I use the fireplace, the braided rope that you put around the outside.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty good seal on, the ash clean out or anything kind of down in a hot area.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So from my question, I guess sort of right now. So on one side, you're needing it airtight so it more or less smolders, but you've also got to have a way to get air into it to get it to start to burn in the first place. So
Yes.
What process do you use for that? Do you just use like they would on a stove to damper it down, or what do you use for that?
That's absolutely a great question. I use usually like an 1 1/4 check valve for a smaller engine, or if I'm going to do something bigger, I'll put 2 1 1/4 check valves on there, and that way it's just a one-way flow. You can just flow the air in, and if the system needs to shut down, the valve closes off, and you're not leaking smoke out everywhere, because with gasifiers you want to create a nice user experience. And if you're, leaking smoke or especially if it has carbon monoxide in it, it just doesn't look good. It doesn't give people the feeling that it's safe and effective and done. So those check valves really help to kind of create that one-way flow. And then what I'll do on my lids is I'll put a spring load. And so in the event that there is any sort of mixture of oxygen and fuel inside, you'll get what we call a poof. It's like a wood gas sneeze. And it's a micro explosion, but it's not dangerous like gasoline. It's like a big achoo. And if you let your lids, kind of rise up with a spring, you'll relieve that pressure safely. And also, I sent you guys some study schematics I had from a long time ago, and I don't know, you're welcome to post those up for your people or whatever you want to do. So they can I have a flow chart in there and they can see kind of what's step 1, step 2, step 3, what are each of the parts of the system labeled. And so you kind of get a better idea after listening to this, or you can, follow along with the schematic while you're listening to have the best kind of understanding of what we're talking about. It's kind of a challenging topic because you're trying to describe things to people sometimes that they don't have any prior knowledge of, like whether it's chemistry or manufacturing or whatever. So, it's good to have as much help as possible.
Appreciate that. I'll get them up on the website for everyone so they can see them.
Nice.
So yeah. Do you have like a lot of wood stoves? They stick a thermometer on the pipe to tell you your temperature, anything like that? Do you have anything? Do you use anything like that? How do you know when it's up to a decent temperature? Like, is it just the way that the smoke isn't coming out the pipe anymore, or how do you guess when to cut it off so that you don't burn too much, but you're not cutting it off too early and it's not getting to temperature?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I used to put thermocouples on everything. So I know what the temperatures are, like in the combustion zone, you're going to be like 1,000 C on up to, like 1,200 C. And then as you get down below the choke plate, you'll get down to about 900 degrees centigrade. And you'll get these reducing reactions happening right up to about 600 degrees. So right as the gas is about at the grate level, we want the gas leaving there probably about 550 centigrade. And then, and so to answer your question, yes, you can put them in. And Steve from Off Grid 48 is actually putting a thermocouple up through the grate shaft. I have enough experience that I just look through the sight glass. I can tell by the color of the hearth inside, whether it's red or orange or even like white hot. That tells me a lot about what's going on. And you're very correct. The quality of the gas coming out. So as it gets finer and finer, it gets clearer and clearer. You're gonna have just a tiny wisp of kind of looks gray. It's just water vapor. But for the most part, it's very clean, and those cues tell me quite a bit. I'll also put my hands in, maybe in different places, and I know by the time, the cooling tubes are hot, that's usually a pretty good indication as well. what you can do is you can take off the sight glass, and since the sight glass looks right through the jet, you can take off that sight glass and rig on a cap that has a thermocouple in it, screw that cap in. I would bore that jet out a little bit more because you're eating up some of the, the airflow with your thermocouple. Your thermocouple's, I don't know, like a half a centimeter or something in diameter. So you just bored that jet out a little bit. And so you can put a thermocouple in there, but when you're pulling, 12 or 1300 C, you're going to eat up a lot of thermocouples over time. So it's good for testing and getting used to the machine. I don't rely on it as much as I, used to. It's a good thing to use. If you are going to go with automation, you can put thermocouples in various places, and it's nice to have a snapshot, but it's something that kind of raises the cost and the complexity of the system. I'm kind of I prefer to be an ultra low tech guy. What got me into gasification is really about powering like a remnant of people through anything. It could be what we're in right now, or it could be a pole shift in the next 10 years. It has to be brute force simple in order to work, in a low resource, situation. So that's kind of the direction I've gone. A lot of other people have gone super high tech, and you could do that as long as your circuit boards are working. But the minute you're not, what are you going to do?
Well, I think the crowd around
for
here.
Me, I much prefer the KISS theory. So just keep it simple, stupid, and that's the way to go. And because that was kind of my thing. I mean, you're experienced enough that you can look through that glass and you can see what it's doing.
Yep.
I would have no clue, and that's where I'm saying, give us something to help us out.
Absolutely.
Us simple people to know where we're at a good stage. And
it's a great question for sure.
Well, I would think that the vast majority of people listening to this podcast would want to do this for, an alternate backup fuel source, aren't going to want to have something that's susceptible to EMP either. So
yeah,
I'd say it's definitely that kind of thing. But no, I think it's nice to see that this is like a legit alternative. Instead of scrounging around for propane tanks afterwards, it's like you could actually go around and set up a wood gasifier and run a generator quite successfully. So that's pretty awesome, actually.
Yeah, and like I said, if you get those kind of critical components, you get a great shaker system, you get a good suction source, and you stockpile some propane tanks and the silicone cord for the seal. That's a really good start. If you did have to run on generator power, building your gasifier, that's definitely a good place to start.
And somebody in the question there asked, and I meant to ask it too. This only works on carbureted engines, correct? It doesn't work on a fuel injection or anything like that. You've got to have a carburetor, like a port to be able to get in, right? It doesn't work, or will it work with a fuel injected engine?
It gets more precise here. You kind of want it will work with the fuel injected engine. You want to get something older. There's computer codes like OBD1 and OBD2 that kind of dictate, what the programming parameters were. Like I think a 94 Ford F-250 was, OBD1. And so you want to be as simple as possible. Some of those you can hack into and change the performance curves. So fuel injection, can be okay. It adds another layer of complexity. I would prefer to just have, a wood gas inlet and go carbureted kind of for the whole EMP, kind of scenario. But yeah, you can do it. Wayne Keith does that. You can find his work at Drive on Wood. Like he uses the Dodge Dakotas and they have fuel injection. I think the same thing with, I don't know if Vesa runs through fuel injection or not. He has tends to have older cars. He might be a carbureted guy, but that's yeah. I prefer the carburetor.
Well, I think the nice
do it on both.
Well, and I think the nice thing is that most generators are still carbureted. I mean, very few of them are fuel injected unless you get super fancy. But I mean, like the vast majority of the champions and stuff out there, even like the Honda EI 2000s, they're all carbureted. So, I mean, yeah, there's definitely alternatives there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I think chat here's got a question.
Yep.
Just in regards to, I think we did, but engine timing. I think you mentioned you do have to make some slight modifications.
When we started out, that was kind of like what everybody was talking about, and we did it, But I noticed people don't really do that so much anymore. I think everybody's kind of got enough wood gas hours now. We go, you know what? It's not destroying the engines like, we potentially thought. So I run everything just at stock now. It's more like if you're going to go 3,600 RPM, those are, tend to be the most affordable generators. if you were going to advance, I'd advance it on, on 3,600 RPM. But if you have an 1,800 RPM generator, which tend to be the better ones, I wouldn't even bother, because you're just not getting enough speed, to make it an issue. But I've never had an issue, with timing. Way back in the day, like I would tar up something and bend a valve push rod tube. And, I could take the engine apart, kind of hammer out the push rod tube and put it back in. And, I've had engines that, I've done that and they've gone on to just run forever on wood gas. What is cool about wood gas is because there's nitrogen in the mix, it does rob some of the power, but you get this really kind of like this soft poof, poof, poof. It's almost like there's a pillow inside the combustion chamber. The nitrogen, it's not so much clang, clang, clang. It's poof, poof, poof. And then the nitrogen grabs some of that excess heat and pulls it out of the system. So I think engines actually, to me, sound better and feel better on wood gas than they do on, say, gasoline. Just a little smoother, just like any gaseous fuel. It's a little bit smoother because the air-fuel ratio is good. Also, I do want to touch on the air-fuel ratio. So for propane, I think it's something like 8-to-1, whereas wood gas is 1-to-1. So 1 unit of air to roughly 1 unit of wood gas. And so that gives you an idea, it's the air fuel ratio is different enough. You kind of want your own intake system just for wood gas. And, like I said, I put plans for that in the book if you want to go that route. If you get some practice with wood gas and like I said earlier, you pull the gas right past the intake. So the gas is so close to getting into the cylinders, you get a nice quick startup. It's not a big deal to run just on wood gas. You know what I mean? You could just take the carburetor off and just run on wood gas. And it's real simple. That's a good start for just driving around your neighborhood. I keep my carburetor in the trunk. If I had some engine problems, I'd unbolt that intake and put the carburetor back on to get home or something. But that's something to think about.
Yeah, it doesn't give me a lot to think about.
The lovely thing about your book, Ben, is it's all simple materials. Start with this propane tank. Easy to source materials. If you want the CAD files, you have those on your website, so you can have someone laser cut your steel so that it's easy for a beginner builder to manage.
Yes. Yeah, people have loved the book. I used to be kind of a snob. I only build stainless steel gasifiers, but the average person isn't going to build a stainless steel gasifier. So I made the book, and I didn't know what people were going to think. I wanted to leave a lineage because I put so many thousands of hours in this. I was like, I have to hand this down or I'm going to feel really stupid. Putting all this time in, I'll listen to the ex-wife bitch and moan about, you're covered in creosote. You stink like carbon monoxide. There was a lot of trials and tribulations in those early days. And so I wanted, to pass down the knowledge and try to move everybody forward. And it's possible. You're going to probably have the best experience if you get a little team together. Trying to do it all on your own, if you're not a fabricator, it may be a little too much, but you get a guy who understands 12-volt electronics from vehicles with a welder, maybe some other person, you could pool your resources, build a nice gasifier, get some experience. If it's not for you, just put it up on eBay, try to get your money back and, at least you tried. But I think once you're into it, you're really going to like it. It feels like magic. It feels like there's a crack in the matrix and you're like, wow, there are things that are possible that are just hidden under the surface. Like I lived in a logging town growing up and everything was wood, but nobody knew this. Nobody said anything about wood gasification. So, it's there. It is possible. Don't underestimate it. It is, you're taking on building a personal refinery. So I don't want to oversell it, but I did try to make it as easy as possible, and I've seen a lot of people build and be happy with it. So I think we're on the right track.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, I guess we should put a link for Ben's book up in the show notes as well, but we'll certainly do that.
Yeah, nice. I've thrown it in the live chat a few times as well.
Okay.
Yeah. With that, should we move on to the podcast challenge?
It's a big one this week. Find something to create or buy something that uses wood. Commercial homemade, a rocket stove, a biolite camp stove, a Kelley kettle, anything. I've been saving this for an hour and almost 9 minutes now.
Yeah, I know.
Anytime you are burning
How many
wood,
times did he
you are
say
producing
CO and he
carbon
didn't even like
monoxide.
screech?
He was
Oh,
muted.
I did, but I was muted for the entire time for that specific reason. Please, 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 anytime you are working around burning fuels, Class A combustibles, make sure that you have your carbon monoxide detector plugged in and that it is working, because otherwise it will kill you. And it will suck the entire time you are dying.
And also, I would say have a hose with a nice little, strong attachment on it, ready to put out the fire. That invariably is going to happen when I start building stuff. So,
I don't really care about that. That keeps your local firefighters busy, and they'll be happy. So,
Yeah.
I care more about you dying than burning stuff down. Stuff is replaceable. People aren't.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So yeah, that's my. I had to calm myself through the last hour, but I think we're good to go now. This is very specifically creating carbon monoxide on purpose through incomplete combustion, and then using it. If there is a leak in your system anywhere that can get into your occupiable space, it is going to do bad things to you. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you're building your system.
Yeah, if I could interject real quick, kind of people ask where's the best place to put a gasifier. If you have a shed away from your house and you can put it kind of under the eave, give it a little space. You don't want to heat up the back of the shed, but it's outdoors, it's ventilated. You might want to put a metal cage around it just to keep anybody from nabbing it or, stealing it, because it's, it might be kind of interesting. But that's usually a good place to put it, and make sure there's no windows nearby, because the carbon monoxide is an issue. Working next to these for years, especially in the beginning when I was just starting out, I did inhale a lot of carbon monoxide, and you feel hungover the next day. There's no doubt about it, because it robs your blood's ability to bond with oxygen molecules, as I understand it.
Yeah, so it bonds to the same sites in the hemoglobin, which is your red blood cells. It bonds to the same sites as the oxygen does, about 250 some odd times more effectively than oxygen. Okay. So you're essentially suffocating internally for a brief period of time, which would be why you're feeling hungover. You've just very simply had a lack of oxygen for a while, and you're exceptionally dehydrated at the end.
Well, there you go. For those with scorecards, we made it 25 minutes before Ben mentioned carbon dioxide or monoxide. Sorry,
it wasn't me,
and it was not Alan. Alan didn't mention it to an hour and about 9 minutes in. So,
and that's got to be a record.
That's totally
pretty sure it is. I'm pretty sure that's the latest I've ever mentioned CO in an episode.
Well, with that, shall we move to deal of the week?
All right, so we have Ammo Can-a-palooza at Princess Auto this week. So Better Andrew from Patriot Podcast, who seems to be a regular contributor now, he pointed out the fact that they have 2 different sets of ammo cans on sale, either 4 pieces of the 30 cal ammo cans with a built-in shelf, or a assortment, all both on for $29.99. It's a good deal, and it's good for building solar power generators and everything else. And, carrying ammo for reasons. But,
sounds like Princess Auto is getting more of my money.
Yeah, that's on until the 15th, I think. So
nice. Right, we'll move into some shout outs. So quick shout out to Darren completing more podcast challenges, 20, 27, 93. Tried out Brazilian jiu-jitsu classes, made and sold choices in EDC, or made some solid choices in EDC, and grew some produce and built a compost box with only hand tools. So, nice work.
So he's the new Ian. He's now more of a keener than we are.
Yep.
Well done. That's pretty awesome.
Way to go, Darren. Impressive. You'll be on the show next. You're replacing Scott now that Scott's gone.
We're taking applications, since this will probably be Scott's last episode.
Yeah. Although this guy might be a good contender for another podcaster here. Bronson Deagle, I got a shout out for. He is a Ontario-based firefighter in training who managed single-handedly to save a family of 4 from drowning this week in a lake. Maybe using his giant gonads as a flotation device. I don't know, but he's
a London firefighter. Actually, he's brand new, and I know the area where they were, and it's nasty for riptides, and he phenomenal effort, and I think London made the right choice by hiring him.
Yeah,
it's hard enough saving 1 person in the water, let alone 4.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
Yeah.
Email iTunes reviews.
Ooh. So we got one from Kyle. And Kyle says, ideas for future podcasts, fire safety for the home. Most people don't have the proper fire extinguisher, which includes size, type, and knowledge on how to use them. Also, the maintenance on extinguishers. I thought Ian left because I was in the live chat for the first time. Well, so we'll start with episode 26. We kind of did a little bit on that. The high level, we will. I was saying before the episode, I don't want to really do an entire episode on fire extinguishers because I would be the only person that finds it interesting. But there's a lot here. So in short, sizing the right extinguisher and getting the right type of extinguisher depends on the hazard that you're coming across. So whether it's most extinguishers you would get for your house would be Class C, which will cover your Class A solids, your Class B liquids, and live electrical. That makes the most sense. There's also a Class D, which would be for flammable metals like magnesium, and a Class K for oils and fats if you were somebody that had a really weird deep fryer setup on a consistent basis. The high-level maintenance, flip it upside down once a month, give it a quick shake, keeps the powder inside from getting all cakey, and then inspect the outside for any visible damage. Make sure that the needle is in the green on the gauge, and if it doesn't have a needle, don't buy it. And then check the expiry date. They need to be hydro tested every, I think, 10 to 15 years, depending on the size of the manufacturer. So check on that and replace it before it needs to be done. Do the same thing with your smoke detectors and your CO alarms.
And when the fire extinguishers expire, get your kids to practice using them, and then you can go refill them.
Yep. Yeah. So there's actually a company because I'm local to London. There's a company here that actually they'll take their old non-certifiable fire extinguishers and sell them for $10 filled. So it can't be certified. I mean, you can use it if you want to. You can keep it around, but they're perfect for practicing. Where you put your fire extinguisher, always put it between your potential hazard, right? Your source of fire, usually in your kitchen, and your exit, so that you're on your way towards safety should you change your mind and decide that you can't fight that fire, or you grab your extinguisher, you try to put it out, it doesn't work. At least you've got an area of refuge. So that's we can expand on that a little bit. We were actually talking about an episode coming up that we could do a little bit more into that without trying to take up a whole hour on shiny red things. But that's a great. Those are some great options, and then mostly we just kick Ian out at random because it's fun sometimes.
Yeah, and I'm antisocial, so I just left anyway. So,
Yeah.
All right,
come back though.
Yeah, cool. I got one from Rome with 2 M's. It says, "Gentlemen, I want to thank you for putting on this podcast. It's become my favorite, so much so that I've gone back and listened to your entire Spotify catalog.
Impressive.
It is funny." Yeah, it is funny and informative without the "we are all going to die" on so many other prepper podcasts. Well, we could do that if you want.
Well, we are going to die, but we might as well have some fun in the meantime.
Yeah, everybody's only got so many years to live. I found the news segment very interesting. That what we have done for preps is getting a little long. My apologies. Yeah, we'll do better. I have a few questions for the panel.
He must be in the Ian and Hughes section of the podcast.
Yeah,
like those episodes were.
You guys are totally competing.
Yeah. Oh well. I do have a few questions for the panel and a few suggestions for future shows. So, 1, here in the USA, once you get your tech license, the FCC can make unannounced and warrantless inspections. Wow. Eric, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, so I nerded out and actually copied the Radio Communications Act Section 8 into the show notes here. Don't worry, I'm not going to read it verbatim, so everybody calm down. Long story short of it, I know, sorry. Long story short of it, inspectors can go into anywhere at a reasonable time without a warrant in Canada, except a dwelling house. So your home. A dwelling house, they require a warrant. To get that warrant, they need to have either already been turned away or have reasonable grounds that they will be turned away if they go and ask for permission first. So they can apply for a search warrant for your house, but it has to be a search warrant. They can come knock at your door and say, "Hey, let us in." And you can politely say, because Canadian, right? "Please go away." Yeah, they can apply for a search warrant, but for residents, long story short of it, they need that warrant. They need to come and ask nicely, and you need to let them in, one or the other. So. But commercial building, yeah, they can just come in anytime they want, warrantless to search. And that's Section 8, Radio Communications Act.
All right, cool.
What's
He also
part of
asked,
Section 7 about possession, or Article 7, possession by Her Majesty. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I put a little tinfoil hat comment in here too about Section 7. So Her Majesty may assume and for any length of time retain possession of any radio station and things necessary for the sufficient working of that station. So yeah, read into that how you want.
so proving once again we don't have property rights in this country. But
Absolutely not.
yeah. All right. He also asked, what about the use of black powder firearms in the U.S. as long as it does not use a 209 primer, which is a shotgun primer, it is not considered a firearm?
Yeah.
Well, for once, again, very rarely, Canada is better off than the States. We actually, believe it or not, if it's a matchlock, flintlock, or wheel lock, less than 500 feet per second, less than 10,000 kilojoules, and less than 20 millimeters, and smoothbore, it is not a firearm. Actually, believe it or not, up until this recent gun ban that we had, we were actually allowed cannons, mortars, grenade launchers, and everything that were not considered firearms. No problem. And then also they introduced all these new restrictions. But we've always been able to send guns through the mail, real guns or flintlocks. But the good news is, yeah, like black powder firearms, generally, if they're flintlock or don't use a primer, basically, so you can use a fuse if you want or whatever, yeah, it's not considered a firearm. But generally not used. There is black powder seasons for hunting around here, but yeah, there's not a big uptake on that. For reasons I just listed off, which sound ridiculous, because I mean, you might as well just use a pellet gun at that point.
I would genuinely like to go deer hunting with a cannon, just see how it goes.
Yeah, you know, actually, I saw a guy at the range a little while ago. He'd actually taken a helicopter shaft, like a drive shaft, bored it out, and he turned it into a smoothbore 50 cal mini cannon with a spring assist on it and everything, and it was fuse powered and smoothbore, so it was like not a firearm.
Wow,
I was like,
That's awesome.
yeah, I was like, that's pretty cool, actually. And he was basically lobbing it at the 100-yard target and stuff. I was like, good for you, man. That's awesome.
yeah.
But he actually had to mount it into the bench with a like lag bolts, or else it was going to fly backwards. But anyway, pretty cool nonetheless.
Cool.
Possible future shows, he says. Food that our ancestors used, such as pemmican, parched corn, hardtack, fruit cake. Joke
Hey, I love fruitcake.
Yeah.
Really love fruitcake.
Nobody likes that. Portable soup, biltong, or beef jerky. So, yeah, I mean, there's certainly, we actually have Carmen coming on hopefully next week, and she sounds like this is right up her alley here. So, yeah, there's certainly something we could cover off on the show there. And also, he mentions maybe what the pioneers took with them, taking a look at the Oregon Trail, the Mountain Men, or the people that went over the Chilkoot Trail in the Yukon. Yeah, because they had to have a minimum of 1,000 pounds of gear, I do believe, over the pass, or else they weren't allowed to even go because they need to have a certain amount of survival gear. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they actually generally brought with them. Just a little bit about himself. He's been prepping for a long time. We also have a dehydrator, and have dehydrated just about anything you can think of. Also, a medium-sized freeze dryer, and we used a water bath and pressure canner. We're going to be trying retort canning soon as the retort bags are delivered, which I don't even know what that is, but I'm sure Carmen will tell us next week.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you from Rome.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Those are some great ideas. I love some of these ideas. Well, we can expand on all of those, sure.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's awesome. All right. Well, with that, I will bring episode 126 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast to an end. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, and of course, your favorite podcast app. Please help us out. Submit a review. It does help other people find us.
We do record these shows live on Facebook and YouTube. If you want an early peek at the show, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Canadian Prepper Podcast, and click the notifications tab. That gives you an alert when we are going live. I'm sure Facebook is similar. If you want to get me, find me at Alan, that's with one L, at prepperpodcast.ca.
And if you're looking for me, I play the gray man. You can just get me at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca.
Yep. I know where to find you.
Yeah.
I may or may
come and
not be.
steal my stuff, right?
Yeah.
Scott may or may not be here, so feedback at prepperpodcast.ca works.
I'm going to steal Scott from you guys, and I'll loan him back to you on occasion.
Okay, that works.
So if you guys want to follow along to what we talked about today, this is the book. It's called The Wood Gasifier Builder's Bible. We have a bunch of videos on our YouTube channel. It's called Victory Gasworks. I have some of my old videos, but there's a reader I have named Steve from Off Grid 48. He just put 28 videos up, I think, step by step of a gasifier build, so you can watch it at home for free. He's like my super reader. So definitely go to Victory Gasworks, and there's lots of free information there. And thank you so much for having me, guys. It's been a really fun time, actually. I'm super stoked. So thank you.
Oh, it's been awesome.
Yeah, thanks for coming out and sharing your information with everybody.
Yeah. If you want to reach Ian, you can contact me directly at theislandretreat@gmail.com or on Gab and Odyssey at The Island Retreat. And you can also find me on Canadian Patriot Podcast, which is on iTunes and YouTube. And in the Discord group, Canadian Patriot Podcast. Email us if you want an invite. There you can just find us discussing why government waste in society gives me gas.
Every week.
I think that's the worst one yet, Ian.
Dad jokes will come fast and furious for a while yet.
Yeah.
Not has you all fired up.
Oh,
That would have been so much better.
you could have told me that
would've
one
been-
before the show.
Yeah, I
too
would
late.
much rather do this live.
Yeah.
All right, you can check out Rapid Survival at rapidsurvival.com. You can get me there on the live chat. You can also email me at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. Thanks for joining us this evening, and until next time, be prepared, stay safe,
And keep learning.